is Doug DeMuro, and today I'm going to tell you about the time that I shipped my Porsche Carrera GT across the country, and I tracked every single mile using an Apple AirTag. This is a funny one, so let's get started. Before I get started, be sure to check out Cars and Bids, which is my enthusiast car auction website for cool cars from the modern era with free listings. You can list your cool car for free and auction it on Cars and Bids. And you should, because we've had some great sales recently, including this BMW M5 competition sold for $67,500. This fantastic Sprinter van brought $80,000. We love cool Sprinter conversions. And this Shelby GT500 sold for $127,000. These things are awesome. If you're looking to buy or sell a cool enthusiast car from the modern era, the 1980s and up, Cars and Bids is the place to do it with daily auctions and great selection. Check it out, carsandbids.com. Okay, so as many of you know, I recently bought this 2005 Porsche Carrera GT. It's amazingly special and wonderful and beautiful and fantastically awesome car behind me. Now, this is a very expensive car. Obviously, everybody knows this. And so I decided, I trust the car shipping company that I use to ship my cars. But in my experience with car shippers, what happens is the car is picked up, they tell you it'll be X number of days, and then you don't hear anything else until the day before they're gonna drop it off, and they call you and say, hey, I'll be there tomorrow. And that's fine. I had my Mercedes station wagon shipped that way, and it was fine. It didn't matter all that much to me. But for this car, it was a little more special. It's more expensive. I wanted to follow along. I wanted to know where it was going and what it was doing, so I put an AirTag in it. Now, if you don't know, very quick, an AirTag is this simple Apple tracking device, and you can track it on your phone. Sort of like Find My iPhone or Find My Computer, but it's just a little circular device, and you can stick it in something and then you can track that something. Now, I know that I'm gonna get 20 million replies from people about how XYZ tracking device is better, but I wasn't like doing this as a profession. I just wanted to kind of casually follow along the car. I didn't really care. I didn't need the finest quality tracking device. I just wanted a simple thing. So I got an AirTag, they're cheap. I sent it to the seller of the car and he threw it inside. Okay, simple. So this turned in to, honestly, it was just as exciting as the feelings I had when the car was delivered. I got so into this. So, before I get started explaining what happened, I should mention that I am like a student of the cross-country drive. I drive all the way across country from California to Massachusetts, from the Pacific Ocean to the Atlantic Ocean every single year twice. I do it twice a year. I have done the drive in total about 15 times, fully across the country. And like everyone who does a lot of long-haul cross-country driving, I'm kind of obsessive about like time and distance and road travel. And I know exactly what time I have to leave San Diego to get to a certain city in Texas in order to be in Washington, D.C. by a certain time 2 days later and blah. I know I've got this down to a science. And anybody who does a lot of cross-country driving or long travel driving is nodding right now. They're like, yup, I know exactly the exit I take to get off to get gas so that I can go a certain distance with my car, all of that. If you do these trips enough, it's just within you. And so I've become literally a student of this cross-country drive. I mean, I have it down to a science, the drive I do every summer to go cross-country. I'm a student of this cross-country drive. So with that in mind, I was kind of curious, how does a professional do it? What does a professional driver do? So here are a few of the things that I've learned. One, they make a lot of stops. They stop all the time. So the car had to go from Connecticut, where I bought it, to San Diego. And I paid extra money to make sure that my car was on the top of the transport and then all the way forward. And the reason I did that is, obviously it's enclosed transport. I did that so that they wouldn't have to be taking it on and off the truck all the time in order to load and unload other cars along the way. I figured between Connecticut and San Diego, they're gonna be doing some loading and unloading. So I'd rather them keep it there, and it means that I'm gonna have to wait longer because I'm last. Like they're gonna load everything up behind me, drop it all off, and then get to me at the end. But the benefit was my car never had to be moved. And with a car like this, that's what you wanna do. But so I figured, okay, fine. So even though I'm last, these trucks hold like 8 cars, right? So there's 7 stops before me. I can handle that, no big deal, and it'll be interesting to see where he stops. Well, that's not what happened at all. The truck made 12 stops before reaching me. 12! Now, that's because I assume in addition to dropping off along the way, it was also picking up along the way. These trucking companies maximize the routes to get every possible dollar out of, the trucks go in this direction, well, send it here, whatever. So, a couple of interesting things about the stops along the way. One, a lot of the stops were at dealerships. And I guess this is no real surprise. Dealers are always selling cars and people don't always buy them locally, so they get shipped. But I guess I didn't really think, like when I think of private cross-country car transport, I think of like a collector in Indiana selling his car to a collector in Arizona, and so it kind of goes from one place to another. I didn't really realize just how much dealers would be a component of this, but honestly, most of the stops that this truck made was at dealerships as I was following along on the AirTag. Now, even though a lot of the stops were at dealers, there were also stops at private homes. And this was tremendously interesting for me because the truck stopped at some crazy private houses. And I asked the driver, never even thought about this before, but I asked the driver, like, you must see some crazy houses and car collections and garages and celebrities when you're dropping off. I mean, this is like high quality enclosed auto transport. It's some of the most expensive cars in the world. He's probably seeing some crazy stuff. And he's like, yeah, yes. So the most interesting of all of the private home stops the truck makes, the truck stops at a rural area in a northeastern state. And I'm like, it's like down a rural road in the middle of nowhere, and I'm like, what is going on here? Like my expensive car is sitting on this truck in the middle of nowhere. So what's happening? So I can't figure out why the truck would be stopping there or what's going on. And then I go on Street View of exactly where the truck is, Google Street View, and I'm looking and I see this house. And back off the road, there's this garage that's massive. And it's got like gas pumps in front of it on this like old time car stuff. And I think to myself, this person is some like rich dude who has a ranch out in the middle of nowhere and he's got a garage full of crazy cars. And that's why the truck is stopping there. And I was like, oh, I get it. I get why the truck is there. That was interesting. So the stops were one interesting thing that I learned. Another interesting thing about this drive cross country is time. 3 things about time. Number 1, these trucks are slow. Now, I know you're thinking, yeah, you idiot, you pass them on the freeway, of course they're slow, you know they're slow. But I don't think I really realized when you pass a semi-truck, a lorry as they call it in the UK, when you pass one on the freeway, you're going faster, it's going slower, but I don't think I really realized how much that adds up over the span of a day. So I can get from Cape Cod in Massachusetts to San Diego, I can do that drive in 3 days, 2.5 actually. A truck is slow. Like even when it isn't limited by hours, which I'll get to in a minute, it just doesn't go all that fast. And so I'm checking the AirTag and I'll check it 2 hours later and be like, really? That's as far as you got? But that's just like, they're slow. They're big lumbering things and they are just slow. And so as a student of this cross-country drive who has the times down to a science and has the gotta get to this city, the trucks just, they operate the same way. The drivers must think the same way, but just on a totally different level. They simply can't go as fast. Now, number 2 thing about time. Legally, trucks can only drive a certain number of hours in a day. There are federal and state laws prohibiting truck drivers from driving over a certain, it depends on the state, it depends on what they're hauling, there's all sorts of stuff, but there are certain hours, a truck driver can only drive X number of hours on before they have to take a break and sleep or stop or rest or whatever. And this is very different from what I can do, like as an individual driving my car cross country every summer. So truck drivers are watching this laughing at me being like, that city boy, he doesn't know about hours. Well, no, I knew there were laws, but I didn't really realize how that impacted a truck's day in travel until I really watched this truck cross the country. And it's limiting. It's really, 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 really limiting. So last summer, when I drove from Massachusetts to California, I did a day where I drove from Indianapolis to Albuquerque. Now, that's an unbelievable day. It's 1,300 miles in one day, 18 hours on the road. Unfortunately, I don't get enough credit for how amazing this day was because nobody knows where Indianapolis and Albuquerque are. But I know because I'm a geography guy and because I'm doing this drive, and that was an enormous day. 18 hours, 1,300 miles in one day. Truckers can't do that. And so they just have much, much slower, smaller distances and slower days on the road. And number three, the other interesting thing I realized watching this AirTag about time is that truckers have to wait for businesses to open. So the truck that had my car dropped off a car at a private home in Austin, Texas, early one Sunday morning. Car was dropped off by noon and the truck was back on the road, and then he goes into some parking lot and just sits. And I'm like, let's go, I want my car. But what happened was he was waiting for the Porsche dealership in Austin to open. They're closed on Sundays. And so he had to sit from noon on Sunday to 8 a.m. on Monday for them to open to do either a pickup or a drop off, I'm not sure which. And that was like lost time. It was very interesting to see that and to realize, like, even if the trucker does what he's supposed to do and shows up where he's supposed to show up, the dealer's not open, or the dude who he's working with isn't available, and so we've got to wait a day. And that stuff happens, and apparently it happens relatively frequently. Now, the funniest part of the Carrera GT AirTag drive across the country is I was watching the travel and I would be hoping that he would take certain roads. So, like, I see him going west in southern Arizona, and I know if he takes a certain highway, it brings him up to Phoenix. But if he takes the other one, it sends him towards San Diego, where I live. And I'm like, I'm like watching as he comes up to the fork in the road, and I'm like, is this gonna be it? Is this gonna be it? Come on, make the turn, go my way. And then he goes the other way, and I'm like, no! So it was actually hilarious to watch these, like, and then I'd see him like going west, and I'm like, yes, and then he cuts south to go to some other stop, and I'm like, no, it's gonna be an extra day, it's gonna be an extra 2 days. I'm like, damn it. So I'm watching this whole thing, and I find it to be just tremendously interesting to watch how this trucker gets across the country, as opposed to me doing it as fast as possible. Here's a trucker who's got all these competing things, right? He's got his hours that he's got to do, he's got the speed of his truck that he's limited by, he's got the businesses open and closed, that he's dealing with, and of course the stops that bring him to all these different places. He can't just go straight. So the funniest part of this whole thing is I'm watching all this for days, right? It only took, in the end, like 5 days, 6 days to get the car across the country. It's like normal travel, but I'm watching the whole time, so it's more interesting. And I'm so interested, like, he's stopping here, oh, he's doing this, he's doing that. And the truck finally shows up, and I'm so excited. The car is here. Everything's so amazing. It's so exciting. And the truck finally shows up, and he's getting the cars off, and all my friends had come to, like, watch the moment the Carrera GT is coming off the truck. And all I want to do is ask the guy, so what did you do in Chicago for 2 days? Why did you spend those 2 days in Chicago? Like, how many hours are you allowed to drive in a day? How did you make so much progress in Texas without running up on your hours? Like, all I wanted to do was ask the dude these questions because I had spent my whole week following along on this guy's drive, and I was just so curious. So, like, my brand new lifelong dream Carrera GT is here. The dude is pulling it off the truck. I'm seeing it for the first time, years of hope to achieve this dream, and I want to be like, so what was that house like in Austin where you stopped? Because it looked crazy. And that was my experience watching the car. Now, fortunately, the truck driver was a good sport about it. I was worried if I told him I'd been tracking him, he'd be like, what? But I think people do this. I don't think this is unusual. And I think he also thought it was kind of cool that someone was like paying attention to like what he had been doing. And so he was like, yeah, this happened and that happened. And we like it was kind of interesting to talk to him about it. And he gave me all the answers to the questions that I had. And then he gave me my Carrera GT, which is now here. The AirTag is still hidden inside it, but I no longer need to track it across the country, at least until it goes back to the East Coast for suspension work this summer, and then I can watch it again. But I do recommend this if you're shipping a car. Send the seller an AirTag when you send the paperwork or the check or whatever. Have him put it in the car. I didn't just watch it. Car shipping, I've never had an actual real like damage issue or anything like that with car shipping, but it is a little mystified. It's like, where's my car? And then one day it shows up and it's like, all right, and everything that happened before that you forget about because now you have your car and you're happy. But it's cool and kind of interesting to see like, where is it going? And then it helps you plan like, okay, it's coming close, it'll be here soon, whatever. And I just found found it to be tremendously interesting to track this thing across the country. And I don't think I'm ever going to ship another car without following along on the phone. There you go, tracking my Carrera GT with an AirTag.